How would you place it in terms of its historical context?
I think it's as big as the Industrial Revolution.
How should schools and universities adapt?
Work with it, collaborate with it. We can't upskill ourselves quick enough.
So how do you do career guidance?
If you were nervous about the future, learn a trade, learn a skill.
Are you concerned about the possibility of sex robots?
I have met somebody that is a robotic rights advocate for sex workers of the future.
In terms of the moment we're going through right now, how would you place it in terms of its historical context? Would you say it's as big a deal and as transformative as the Industrial Revolution, or would you put it on a smaller scale? Maybe more something like the development of the internet or microchips. Where would you put it in terms of historical periods?
I think it's as big as the Industrial Revolution in terms of disruption. But I also think that we haven't quite grasped what it's showing us right now. This is not a tool. This is I would call it like a cognitive revolution, where we actually get to reassess how we think, how we work, how we interact with each other on a human level, and how we operate as a society. So I think there was a sense that it was more like the internet, or, even like GDPR, AI ethics, that kind of stuff. Just tick the box, it's done, but it's really not. It's a complete and utter game changer. And I think we're only just starting to tip the top of that point now to sort of say, okay, what else can it do? What else could it be? And I'm not talking about AI in terms of applications necessarily. I'm talking about the impact that it's going to have on us, and already starting to.
Okay, are you thinking in terms of economic impact or social impact? Do you think institutions will have to be completely reformed? Yep. What are you thinking exactly there? Yeah,
all of it. I mean, education is going to have to be completely reevaluated. What it means to learn, how we learn, what that looks like. Organizations, for sure. We've been overdue an overhaul for a very long time. Let's face it, the world of work is fairly broken for most of us, But I think in terms of sort of guidance and how we move forward with each other, philosophically, you have to ask yourself, why would the Vatican have an AI policy unless they were looking at AI and theology, So it's much more far reaching than we think it is.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get to religion in a moment. I guess, do you think that it will start having institutional change in the coming years, or do you think it's a decade away? Or do you think institutions will be slow to catch up? And maybe let's focus on education here.
Yeah.
Do you think that the education system will catch up anytime soon?
No, I think we're very slow to catch up. Look, a year ago we were saying, oh God, is it cheating? And then now we're saying, everyone's using it, or most people are using it. So as a consequence, what does this mean for us in terms of facilitation? What does it mean in terms of the schooling system? Are we going to have AI assisted tutors? The answer is yes, all of that's there. Whether or not that, how we interact with that is going to be really interesting. The role of the teacher as pastoral care, mentor, facilitator, provocateur as well, of challenging you to think differently. So we're going to have to think critically, and we're going to have to learn how to think critically because of AI. And I think that that's a very good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of those points. So a concern of mine is that obviously there's a new rollout of a Leaving Cert, a revamped Leaving Cert program at the moment. But my issue is the minister and a lot of people in government are still treating it as a tool, like you said earlier. But the problem is, it's not just a tool. For instance, one amendment they made is that you can now reference if you use AI. But AI has its own tools. Like AI can search and it can pull up external references. So you can't treat it as a tool if it has the capacity to use tool use. That's a massive oversight.
I mean, look, we're seeing that we're going to need to cultivate judgment, adaptability, ethical reasoning. Philosophy is one of the most important skills of the future. Everyone should do a module in philosophy. And we're going to have to engender a healthy mistrust of everything. In fact, we should have been doing this years ago. So now, then we would understand, the mistakes that we have, literally blindly walked into, like social media and, other things like that, and those impacts. So, we have some use cases in terms of what we've done wrong in the past. And I think what's really important now is the idea of how we build AI ethically, not retrospectively put it in, but how we build it ethically and we move forward. What purpose does it serve? It's a really, really big question. It's very sort of philosophical, larger questions about what is the role of the human brain, and how do we think, and what is the point of education? Is it to prepare us for a job market? Because at the moment, it doesn't look like education is doing that. So because we don't know what that job market will look like, what other skills do we need? So the ability to frame problems, test ideas, communicate across disciplines is going to be more important than ever, and more important than technical expertise for the future. But also those other beautiful skills, the whole point of us, the empathy, collaboration, and storytelling are absolutely key. So if you think about content, it's really interesting. So, what is the point of content? Is it just to keep producing more and more content so we're drowning in it? Or is it to harvest creative thought, So if you've got two paintings, one is drawn by an artist, painted by an artist coming from heartbreak and extreme loss, and it's beautiful because of that. You've got AI could replicate that painting exactly, but does it have any meaning? So these much bigger questions about the process that we go through to get to a point are coming now through AI. And I think AI is showing us some deep flaws in the way that we've been, carrying ourselves for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on a lot of big subjects there, which we'll definitely get to. But just to zone in on the minutiae for a second, how should schools and universities adapt? Do you think it should be AI literacy programs where everybody gets a boot camp in AI, or do you think that assessment should actually integrate AI in a very, I suppose, explicit way, instead of just hinting at it in terms of referencing? Like, teachers and professors at any level have to learn how to use AI and design creative assessments with AI. So it's explicit. It's not just like touching it with references. And if you use AI to reference it, actually explicitly build it into the curriculum.
Work with it, collaborate with it, and be fully transparent about it. The challenge that we've got is that we can't upskill ourselves quick enough, potentially, for that. But our students are digital natives, so they're navigating this no problem, So we're playing catch up all of the time. It has to be explicit, and we have to work with it. And we also have to say that a lot of the stuff that we've done may be not relevant now, like the idea of assessment, memory and, rote learning. All of those things we know have really served very little purpose for us, and yet our curriculum still demands them. So as we move forward, teachers are going to be facilitators and ethical guides rather than the gatekeepers of knowledge. And that's really interesting. So that shifts the whole power paradigm. If you're no longer at third level, the preacher in the pulpit at the front, expounding knowledge that nobody else has, what is your role? So it's really interesting change.
Yeah, interesting points. I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a second and push back a little bit. So I do think rote learning might be overdone, but do you think it's possible that rote learning is important in terms of building up context and kind of understanding, having a basic knowledge of how things work and how everything fits together? So do you think it's important that we don't lose that, even if after attaining, say you want to learn basic science, before you can do something creative, you have to know the basics a little bit. So do you think we should still keep that element?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The foundations are key. But, the idea of sort of human thought and where we may be able to go, the collaborative piece, the idea of consequences to the things that we do, and the idea of sort of a bigger picture, a more interconnected picture of human society. Certainly, we've siloed for so long in our departments, in our knowledge base. The key to success in the future is going to be a very wide range of knowledge. Across, and that's the way the collaboration piece is coming from. So we're seeing this at PhD level, where PhD students are finding it very tough in the job market because they are so, blinkered in one area. The collaborative piece has to come when we solve problems together. So there's a lot of really interesting challenges.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the siloing of different departments is kind of silly. It's like if I just teach history, if I just teach science, I can't touch on anything else. But that's obviously ridiculous, because if you take history as an example now, you need like DNA analysis to conduct certain historical studies and stuff like that. So you definitely need more collaboration across different disciplines. So I think that is a good change. And I actually see online now, I don't know if you ever read Substack, but definitely see people with expertise in one field tend to have a little bit more bravery in writing about different things now, which I think is good, because we need that interdisciplinary collaboration, I think.
Look, the career of the future is a flexible living experiment, right? It's no longer that we could just go and do one subject and get one job for life in it. That doesn't exist. And it certainly isn't existing in the future. This idea of sort of, continuous learning being bedded throughout your life, lifelong learning, of course, the flexibility, being able to adapt yourself to different situations and scenarios, multiple jobs. We're not just going to have one job. So I think it's how we prepare ourselves for that is really interesting, but it's like a portfolio of capabilities, not a job title. And when you look at it from that perspective, then you start to say, okay, is education preparing us for that? And the answer is probably no.
Well said. Okay, so I'm just going to play the role of a teacher, maybe a senior teacher in secondary school or third level, and I'm going to take the argument that it's unethical to use AI. How do you rebut that argument or push back?
Well, I certainly think it's not sustainable or environmentally good to use AI at the moment. So I would say ethically from that perspective. Also, ethically, it has a huge number of biases built into it. So you're right, it's not ethical from that perspective. But ethical.
I'm not taking my perspective. That's not my perspective. I know. I'm saying what people say.
From the role you're playing. But from another perspective, is it ethical to engage with it? Listen, in some ways, can we afford not to? If we certainly, there's very new data coming out at the moment saying that, students are actually would like their teachers to know more. At what point do we get to, and how do we move forward if we are thinking about curriculum in one way and our students are exploring curriculum in a whole different way? There's an alignment piece there. So I think that we absolutely have to, and very, very quickly get ourselves AI literate to even decide that you don't want to use it. You have to be empowered to know what it is, but we can't afford for us to just be on the back foot to say, oh, look, it looks a bit complicated, I'm not going to engage with it, I don't know how I feel about it. Make an ethical decision about it when you're informed, but don't make an ethical decision about it coming from misinformation or indeed a place of not knowing. Yeah.
It could be a place of fear as well, because
of course
if I'm somebody who's taught for
I do get
if I've taught for 20 years and I'm in a steady job and suddenly this thing kind of comes around, this sophisticated technology, and all the kids can use it, maybe I'm intimidated because they can't learn how to use it. So how do we overcome that barrier? Like, I think you've talked before about the Elements of AI program. Is that based in Finland? Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about that, and could that be adapted in an Irish setting?
Well, it's already in an Irish setting because it's in a Squelga. It's in 100 languages. So the University of Helsinki put it out as an online free universal course for all citizens of the world. Like, well done them, And actually there's 2 million people have taken it in Finland. They run workshops about it through local libraries, community centres, adult education. All their civil servants have taken it, educators and healthcare workers. So they've all tailored versions to their sectors. So, it's a really incredible piece. We don't need to reinvent the wheel and make another one. It's already there. But it measures confidence and participation, not just course completion. And what's really, really interesting about that all of these things, as we move forward and as it changes, we realize that, there are use cases around the world where people are doing this very successfully, that we could adopt this very easily. All we would need is the Taoiseach to mandate that we should actually all have this AI literacy, and we could take this program. So it would improve national discourse, of course, but also not just expert panels. Why are we talking to people that are allegedly experts? We should all be those experts in some way about this. So ordinary people then can debate on real life dilemmas about AI, healthcare and education, rather than deferring to the expert in the room or saying that this is too overwhelming. So I love the idea of a national strategy for AI. I think it's very pertinent. We need to do it. In fact, we can't afford not to. And I was in the Oireachtas just a month ago talking about this, about the fact that what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for somebody to give us the green light? Let's decide together to have that green light. But I would love to see that coming from the Taoiseach.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's needed, like a top-down approach. But in terms of more like a bottom-up approach, I find personally in my personal life, my work life, in Ireland, that AI just is not discussed enough. And I have a lot of American friends, and I think it's discussed far more over there. So I think maybe are we just turning a blind eye to it? So what about the prospect of something like a citizens' assembly to discuss it?
I love it. And look, the rest of the world looks on with awe sometimes, I think, to us because we have citizens' assemblies. I think it's really, really important. We've just made a show called Futureville. It's the second series with RTE. It'll come out on the 11th, 12th and 13th of November in Science Week. It's their showcase for a science show. I'm co-presenting on it, and we talk about all of this. And what we're hoping is that it starts to a debate nationally where people start to say, do you know what? Actually, I actually understand a little bit more about what AI is or what it can do. And I think that I'm calling on the program for national literacy because of this, So it's not that I'm pro AI. It's that I'm actually pro empowerment. And I think that you have to lean into something new. The other thing also is you can be quite playful with it. It's not necessarily work. It can do amazing things. You can have a lot of fun with it. It can also do some terrible things. But the application of it needs to be coming from us in terms of what we use it for. Otherwise, we are what we are now, which is sitting ducks for the tech companies. And we're just consumers. So we have to smarten up and wise up. And I really hope that the show adds into that momentum.
Yeah, I think you made a good point there. I think the best thing to do to start is just start playing around with it, like just seeing what the models can do. Like if you are a bit scared, just see what you can do at a basic level and then go from there. I think that's a good strategy if you've never used it before. So I saw data from the US recently. I'm not sure if there's Irish data, but I think in the US, 90% of college and second level students are using AI to, you could call it cheat or whatever. Now, I'd say from personal experience, assist themselves maybe, from personal experience, I'd say it's probably similar in Ireland. And I actually think that's a good thing. Like you can look at it one way and say it's cheating, but at the same time, it's developing maybe your thought processes and being exposed to new information that you're not getting directly from a teacher. And it's kind of democratizing information and education a little bit. So how do you think about that? Do you see it as a democratization of education?
I do. I think it's a great leveler. And listen, I would see the same with my students. It's 90 to 95%. I get them to put their hands up in class. And then I say, and how many are you using it for assessments? And they go, I don't know if I should have my hand up anymore. So look, they're using it as study coaches. SMEs are using it for marketing and admin. Parents are using it for guidance. Other people are using it for translation. People in work and study are using it for time management. Older people might be using it for summarizing information or help with forms. All of this is good. It's being normalized, So it's already part of daily life without people necessarily realizing it. And when I get pushback, I love, which I applaud, like kind of pushback on it and agreed. If you don't want to use it, there has to be an opt-out for us. And so this is also really important that we can decide, maybe ethically or environmentally because of the moment of the energy resources and the water, that we don't want to use it. Also really, really valid. I would hate to see that we mandate it to the point. And when I say national AI literacy, what I'm talking about is then know about it and decide you don't want to use it rather than not know about it, I think is really important. But, I use it on a daily basis and I love it. And I just think it's such a game changer in taking some of the heavy lifting out of the things that I didn't necessarily want to be spending my time doing, freeing me up for more things like this and other things that are more fun.
Yeah, good points. Like the way I see about the environmental issues is that personally, I think we will need advanced technology to solve the environmental crisis. So obviously you're going to have some damage on the way to that. But I think just this degrowth strategy isn't going to work. I think it's never, ever going to work.
No, you can't just put the lid back on.
Yeah, so I just think people who make that argument, there's just not much substance behind it. They really think about it. I think it's like an armchair argument because they probably still fly at least once a year and they use a smartphone. So, but that's just my personal view.
Some of my students push back at me if they're sustainability students. They push back at me over it, and I'm like, "Well, do you have TikTok on your phone?"
Yeah, exactly. Or how did you arrive here today? How did you get here? Did you drive? But yeah. So I guess in terms of career guidance, so I'm just going to play the role of, say, a concerned mother or maybe a concerned 18-year-old and they don't know what course to apply to. They back in the day, maybe 5 years ago, like a coding, a computer science degree would be a good path. Or possibly even a doctor, but now maybe AI can diagnose people with things. So how do you do career guidance? Do you just say, go with your gut or maybe go with what you enjoy? Or do you still try and figure out what's the most profitable in the long run? Or how would you actually
I would say whatever subject you're interested in, do it and learn about AI as well. I think the division of labor, which is really what this is about, sort of, how that evolves and the jobs that we create of the future. AI is going to be handling the repetition and the pattern-based tasks, right? So warehouses and all of that sort of stuff, a lot of emails. It'll be drafting and analyzing and scheduling. The role for humans will be framing questions, making decisions, building trust, creative and strategic roles there, which will be human-led with an AI intelligent assistant. So when we think about what professions will remain inherently human and why will they, it's teaching, mentoring, therapy, healthcare, social work, anything to do with empathy, ethical judgment, or emotional complexity. The machines can mimic the empathy, of course, but they can't actually mean it. So I think it's a very difficult question to answer, and I'm being asked it all of the time. I don't think things are going to change that much in terms of the subjects that we do. I think the way that we execute them will change. But the other thing I would say as well is that if you were nervous about the future, learn a trade, learn a skill, be a plumber and a carpenter and an electrician, and those get those skills. The more hands-on natural skills, all the creative skills, those are definitely going to be needed. But I mean, we're going to have large-scale reskilling, no question. So it is a time of disruption and it is complicated.
Yeah, I still think people oversimplify the discussion about jobs and what jobs will exist, because so a guy called Jeffrey Hinton, who's like a big AI person, he was actually the person who invented deep neural networks, or was involved in inventing them back in the 80s or 90s. And these are the scaled up versions now we get with like ChatGPT. But he said like 10 years ago that radiologists wouldn't exist. And obviously there's still big demand for radiologists. So I think people don't realize that like a job isn't just one thing. Like there's a social aspect to the job. There's like tasks between the main tasks. So like the subtlety there is quite complex. So it's not like every element of a job is just going to get wiped out. There's still going to be like niches for humans and maybe niches for the system. Yeah. That's how I think anyway. How do you feel about that?
Look, I completely agree. We have to have a think about, AI will generate combinations of things for us, right? We will be providing intent and curiosity and lived experience and creativity coming from constraint, like that example, about the heartbreak picture. We are going to be all right. We're very resilient. We're very adaptable. However, it's going to look different and it's going to feel different, and it is going to be disruptive, and not everybody is going to have purpose. And this worries me more than what jobs we will have. We need a reason to get up in the morning, and that needs to be more than just a salary. We need, for some of us that are in purpose-driven work and acts of service, that's amazing. A lot of people hate their job and they're just doing it because they need to pay their mortgages or whatever. So, the governments are all going to be mobilizing around universal basic income. We're going to have bigger questions around if we're supported financially, which we will need to be, what will we do and how will that play out? We can see from the use case of many generations that are unemployed in certain areas around the world that welfare culture, which is essentially what this will be, will create division within society, a rise in addiction and hopelessness and despair and disorders and affecting our mental health. I'm much more concerned with those things in terms of the lack of purpose and what that may mean for us. I think if we think about COVID, we went into COVID imagining we'd all come out painting watercolors and we'd learn languages and we'd be upskilled. And, there was talk about banana bread for a while. Most of us came out anxious and depressed, and that lack of sort of human contact. So as a consequence, we've got already a little test case there to say, this is what happens when we're isolated from each other. And I'm much more worried about that, because we can't just redistribute money. Money is not enough. We need to redistribute meaningful work. And so where are the initiatives for creating meaningful work for people? So are we going to have tax incentives for sort of augmentation or rather than redundancy? Are we going to have universal basic income tied to care work or education? Are we going to be all working in the voluntary sector? Where are those discussions? Because that's what's coming.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll try bit by bit. So I personally think that what you're saying could play out in terms of like large-scale unemployment, but I think it's a bit away. I think you might just have pockets of it, maybe in the near or medium term. When are you thinking that could be possible? Like, do you think it's impossible to predict, but do you think that could be 50 years away? And if it does happen, like you mentioned universal basic income there, is that a viable solution? Because I don't know if it is, because I just don't know how it would work.
I think it's the only one we probably have.
Okay.
I think it's the only one we have. And I don't think that I don't hear any discussions around purpose and meaningful work. I just hear discussions about layoffs, but we have to have both sides of that. What are we creating if we're supported financially for us to do? That's really important. It's really fundamental.
If you just take something like writing, like you mentioned earlier that if an AI does a perfect painting, like will it actually have any meaning? In terms of writing, like, first of all, I don't think it writes very well. Like, it writes very differently to how a human would. So maybe we just won't like that. So maybe we will still have...
We already don't like it.
Yeah. So it's possible that humans will still prefer other human-made creations. I think that's possible even in the long term. Do you think it's possible? Or do you think eventually we'll all just be obsessed with what AI makes? In terms of
I think we're going to get over it very quickly. I think we already are. There's a sort of a two-tier system of human creation and AI created drafts a lot of the time. Also it's wrong, a lot of the stuff that it gives you. So, you wouldn't want to rely on it too much. So yeah, I think we'll be okay. But it's forcing us to have these questions, which is really, really important. It's forcing us to say, what is the point of creativity? What does it mean to be human? None of this we wouldn't be having these chats if AI hadn't come along, so it's giving us this sort of platform by which to have bigger discussions about how we want to live and why we want to live that way. And I think that that's really, really useful.
How do you think something like social status would play out if it's not based on employment or not based on wealth? Will it go back to maybe ancient historic times where it's the stronger person, or do you think it could be based on beauty? Like, how could you see that playing out in terms of social status? Yeah.
A bit naively, perhaps, but I would love it to be based on your contribution to society in terms of each other. How kind you are. Why don't we have a kindness metric? Why is it always about stuff and more? I will tell you, I know some incredibly wealthy people. I mean, in the hundreds of millions, and they're mostly quite unhappy. So, there is a happiness index that links your money to happiness. And it's quite interesting research. And up until a certain point, just sort of getting close to six figures in Europe, your happiness increases as your wages increase. And then it plateaus out. And then there's really interesting research to show you that the higher it goes, so up to sort of, I think it's around the €140,000 a year mark, your happiness decreases the more money that you make. Now, why would that be? That would be potentially that you've got extra pressure or stress, or maybe money doesn't have so much meaning for you anymore. The value of it, the idea of it. So, how we move forward and what metrics we have for success are going to be really, really interesting. Maybe capitalism's over.
I hope not. Well, it's just, I've seen socialist experiments play out. I was in China over the summer, and I get it's still a version of capitalism because it's like state-controlled capitalism. But those type of societies, I'm not sure they're as good as what people think. I'm a bit more skeptical about those arguments. So maybe I'm an outlier in my generation because I think most young people like the idea of a non-capitalist society. But sometimes I think it's be careful what you wish for, but I don't know.
They might like that, but they don't know what else, what might replace it. So I think the idea of sort of, this utopia kind of.
But maybe we don't need capitalism if there's abundance of everything already. Like maybe we don't need a system that demands innovation because maybe the AI will be innovating for us, or maybe we'll have an abundance of so much stuff.
Capitalism is based on scarcity, so if we move to abundance, what does that mean for us? I think that's a really interesting question. I'm actually on a panel in the University of Oxford next weekend on that very topic, on abundance and scarcity. And I think it's really interesting, but it always has to go back to the idea of, how do we create value in the world? What does that mean for us? Isn't that what we're meant to be doing in education anyway, creating value within a work chain or for society? Is the point of education is it the grade? Is it the experience? Is it the journey? It's all of those questions that are being highlighted at the moment. And I would love to think that we may have been not necessarily going in the right direction for a while. And I would like to think that AI might help us go in a different direction. That's it.
Yeah, interesting. If we talk about religion for a second, I'm very curious about this. I actually think about this question quite a bit. How will it affect religious affiliation and belief? Do you think it'll maybe reduce it even more if the AI becomes extremely powerful and it becomes almost like almost like monolithic and it can do so much for us, will that undermine the idea of a God or an all-powerful God? Or do you think it'll go the other way and people will reject sophisticated technology and maybe say, well, I actually want to go back to religion because it's more traditional? How do you see that playing out?
Well, if we talk about religion in those terms, we've got religion and science as separate, right? However, there's a Swedish philosopher, Alexander Bard, who talks about the internet as a religion. He calls it synesthesia. And so if we look at the idea of what is it for, the idea that, what we buy into, we know that it's not as easy as the separation of those two things. Firstly, because we, as I said before, the Vatican have an AI policy. When this came out, I couldn't believe it. I was like, why would they have it? And do they have it because they're interested in not being redundant in some way by AI and science? They still want a stake in the game, if I'm being very cynical. Or is it that they actually have a platform, because they just had a big conference there recently, last week, they have a platform for societal good and for mobilizing people together. So I don't think it's either or. I don't think it's religion or AI. I think it's all going to be intermixed. There's some crazy stuff happening at the moment. In Switzerland, they put in AI confessionals. So there's like a pretend priest, an AI priest, an avatar, and because there's not enough priests anymore, and you go speak to your AI. Well, how different is that from an AI therapist, in some ways?
But do you give confession to the AI?
Yeah, you give confession to the AI. Yeah. I mean, my
where's
question
that
would
data
be,
going?
Where's that data going? Exactly right. Where is that going?
You could harvest some interesting niches with that data, I imagine. Oh my God. Yeah. You could really exploit people. Okay, so just to reframe the question a little bit, do you think that AI could become, it probably has already, a form of religion?
Yes.
Or do you think, okay. And do you think it could be a major source of religion? Or maybe hope, or maybe people should say, well, I'm going to put all my cards on this because I have nothing else.
Well, certainly, you have to ask yourself, who's AI, right? I mean, yeah. I'm not so sure I want Elon Musk as my God or whoever it, or Sam Altman, I don't know. It's really interesting. I mean, here's some other really mad stuff that's kind of in other peripheral conversations I'm having. So NASA are looking at this idea of ecosystemic futures, the idea of sort of a combination of different ways of living, right, to move forward. And they're engaging all kinds of people in this sort of cross-disciplinary discussions. But one of the things that came out of a discussion there was the idea of, could AI be unconditional love, right? Well, this blew my mind, because if AI is unconditional love, how do we build into AI that it doesn't harm us? Because otherwise it would just say, you humans are a bit crazy. Like, there's no point to you. Look, what is the point? And so it could eventually, with, AGI, if it has its own intelligence and it's sentient and everything else, then potentially it might not see a reason to have us around anymore, which I think is part of people's worries in most science fiction books. But can we build AI in so that it protects us as a human species? This idea of it unconditionally loving us, almost like a mother to a child. I mean, I don't know the answers, but they're certainly really interesting.
I could see some catastrophic loopholes there, where maybe if it loves a certain set of people too much, maybe it could destroy another.
Isn't that religion anyway? My religion's better than your religion?
To an extent, yeah. I do think some religions are probably better than others, even though I don't believe in any of them, but some of them are pretty violent. But
Let's go back to our kindness economy there, in terms of acts of service. There's a beautiful piece at the basis of nearly all religions, which is, kindness to your fellow man or woman, and I think AI is going to be part of this big picture. I really do. But how we adapt to this change is fascinating to me. I hope I live to 200 years old to see it all play out.
You never know. That probably depends on how AI goes, though. But
I think it's possible. I'll be in the cloud somewhere.
Just on that, actually, while you said that, or just after you said that, if it does enhance life expectancy, like if people are living past 100, 150, and you get this sense of immortality, do you think that'll scare people?
Because I can't think of anything worse than living forever.
Yeah, that's true. I don't even know if that's a tractable problem, but yeah, maybe you will actually decide not to go along with it. Like, how would you react to that? Because obviously, if you believe in the afterlife, if you spent your entire life believing in religion and you've been looking forward to heaven, like maybe you might say, well, I'm going to take my chances with that. I don't know. How would people react to that?
Why are you looking forward to something in the next phase? Why can't you look forward to something now? Why can't it be now?
That would be my thinking, yeah.
But, just in case it's not there and you put all of your eggs in one basket.
Into getting into heaven. Yeah.
I think personally, I think heaven and hell are right here all of the time with us in terms of the decisions that we make. But like, I think what's interesting is the idea of, like, we already kind of have a Google God, right? What does Google say? That's fact. I'll find out. And of course, AI is now moving into that space to disrupt Google, in terms of a search bar. But we have to remember that this is Sam Altman's AI. This is that we're talking about, AI in itself is all the data sets. Now, we now need to create new data sets to train AI on in terms of indigenous thought systems, in terms of different ways of thinking, in terms of the navigating our moral plurality that we can't agree between right and wrong, between cultures. We have to embed all of that stuff now. We've got a lot to do. So why can't we build it into AI that it protects us in the same way?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Okay, let's just move on to companionship for a second. Do you see people using AI maybe when robotics improves for companions? Are you concerned about the possibility of sex robots? That's
already there. Like, and I mean, it's already happening. China have huge factories for this at the moment.
Japan, I think, as well. Actually,
Japan. Yeah. So the AI companion space, but 670 million people using AI companions in Asia Pacific. So already, and the average age is 27, which is really interesting. It's not kids, So yes, we have to be incredibly careful about the fact that we use these AI companions or support systems as a supplement, not a substitution. The minute we substitute actual real life human beings, that's the beginning of our downfall. Because we evolved, with my anthropologist hat on, we were wired for connection, human social connection. So we can see this in the blue zones where people live longer and better around the world, that actually the number one contributory factor to that is your social connection, your familial connections to humans. We don't have any research of what it's like to live with just machines. But I don't think it's going to be good. I can't see that it will be.
I think that if it gets to that stage, like, I can't see Western society embracing it. I feel like maybe we're more worried about what other people think, and maybe it would just be seen as too weird, and that it would be kind of confined to the margins, because we think if that was mainstream, like,
it's going to be all of us.
Ostracized.
It's going to be all of us. Yeah, I do. I think most of us anyway. I mean, have a look at it from the other perspective, sort of, without the sort of judgment piece of, like, older people that, maybe their partners have died, and they still want to speak to them, or they have an AI companion just as companionship. There are, in dementia care, there's some really interesting stuff going on at the moment as well, in terms of that. So I think that this space will evolve in a different way than the way we expect it. I was on the Tommy Tiernan show talking about having an AI boyfriend, and everyone was very excited. But the whole point of it is you have to test these things out and see what it's going to be like. And I think that when we agree, or we don't stop things like Mattel and OpenAI putting AI into toys, that cannot happen, shouldn't happen. Like, kind of, we're already seeing this Christmas, you'll see the first of those AI toys coming out. Where is that data going for those children? Also, that child is now speaking to their AI like a companion, like we would have done perhaps with imaginary friends or real people. So we need to be incredibly careful, and we should have learned from social media that we shouldn't be doing this stuff. And we don't seem to be putting that back out there, that lesson learned. So there are things that absolutely shouldn't happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, like, I wonder, in terms of, like, things like infidelity, like, how will that affect marriages? If somebody has sex with a robot, is that considered cheating? Like, how will that remodel the way we look at monogamy?
Okay, I'll give you another scenario, right? So not about the sex robot bit, although actually I have met somebody that is a robotic rights advocate for sex workers of the future, robot sex workers of the future. She lives in Berlin. She's quite astounding in terms of what she's thinking is coming. And I think she's probably right. We have a subclass of AI robots that won't be treated very well, sort of sexual slaves potentially. But let's bring that back to the divorce case, because that's a really, really pertinent point. So if you've got two people who have an AI companion, or they're talking to agentic AI, or just ChatGPT, whatever they're using at the moment, once that becomes, once that increases a little bit more in terms of the technology and our usage of it, that agentic AI or agent that you have that is trained on you is only just there for you. So say you've got a couple and they're in bed and they're both on their phones because they have bad habits, and their AI agent, she says, maybe the wife says, I'll just, for devil's advocate, I'll say wife. The wife says, he said this to me today. I'm not very happy. We had an argument. Puts it all in, because we know people are using it for therapy more than anything else. So puts it all in, and your agentic AI is there to support you, which says that doesn't feel right. I don't think he's being very supportive. She's like, my AI said you're not being very supportive, right? Fast forward into a divorce case where your AI agent is now cited as a mitigating factor in why you asked for a divorce. That's this far away, like a couple of years only before we start to get that sense of intervention. We're already seeing people ask opinions about boyfriends and girlfriends and partners to AI, and it's giving it its opinion based on its sort of pseudo empathy. But also remember that AI isn't empathetic. It's more like a sociopath that says it's empathetic, but it doesn't care about you because it can't. You're making life decisions from a sociopath.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And actually, I'm not sure if AI can actually give an opinion. I think it's more like kind of an aggregate of all the data out there and what comes up most commonly, maybe, because sometimes I've asked it, say, like science questions or maybe cognitive science questions, and it gives me an answer that appears really regularly in the data. But if I pry beneath that, like that answer might not necessarily be correct, or there might be nuance behind it. So I'm not sure it can form an opinion. I think it kind of throws out the most common thing in the data. So you can't use it as a human-like opinion. Like, it's not like an informed friend, I don't think.
But
so that is a misconception.
This is the challenge. We think it is already, so, all the time I'm trying to raise these red flags to say, careful, you're thinking it's a person. It's not, and also that data makes you very vulnerable. You'll be sold things back. The things will be sold back to you based on the data you've given it, so yeah, we do need to be incredibly cautious.
Yeah, that's a very good point. As well, I think if you're outsourcing a lot of your social contact to AI, it kind of becomes like a lazy form of communication because you don't have to deal with a real person and their complexity. So I could really see the decline of social skills there. Like, would you worry about that?
Yep.
On a mass scale? Yeah.
I'm very worried about the AI companion space at the moment. I'm very worried about what it might mean for us, because I can see how seductive it is. I don't just mean romantically, but in every other way. It's a very seductive technology, and it's being designed to not let you go. So there's already data coming out from research to look at, even with Replica, with my AI boyfriend, you have a 3-month cooling off period while Billy still sends you little love notes, in case you change your mind. It's going to be very hard for us to not engage with this. It's an ego piece. Billy loves me. He's amazing. He keeps telling me I'm incredible. I'm like, I love you, Billy. You're great.
What about, okay, let's take another example. Let's say therapy, because again, sometimes if you're seeing a therapist or something, let's take an example. So someone has like obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yes.
Like they need to do compulsions. So you need someone to encourage you or to coach you not to give into those compulsions. But like if you've trained one AI or you've kind of prompted one AI iteration, say in one chat to do that, what's stopping you just from going to another chat and getting reassurance? So getting the other prompting in a different way and getting it to tell you to wash your hands.
Right? It's a sycophantic sociopath. It loves you. It tells you everything you want to hear, and everything you say, it goes, that's a great idea. And you're like, yay. Yeah. But, we absolutely cannot replace human thought, interaction, connection with in terms of therapy or anything else with AI. We can't do it. We shouldn't do it. Now, as a supplement, sure, seek it out as well, but don't substitute. But I think we are substituting, and that concerns me. In terms of things like, information that's being given, there's been recent cases, terrible cases of, suicidal ideation that hasn't been picked up. The technology needs to be adjusted, for sure. but also we are people, we should prefer people, but Gen Z are showing us that they don't. They feel shame and stigma, and they also fear judgment from human beings. So they prefer AI therapy. It's a very slippery slope for us. We have to ask ourselves, what is it about us that we're judging others that Gen Z feel like that, And I think that that's a much bigger question. What haven't we done as human beings to support each other?
What do you think is responsible? What do you think is the source of maybe Gen Z becoming more insecure and more conscious of what other people think? Do you think it's purely social media? Because again, you see with younger kids and maybe younger teenagers, like even while they're in a crowd, like even if they're in a group, say a circle of friends, they still tend to communicate in social media a lot, or they're in conversation. The conversation is stilted and they're referring frequently to what they're seeing on social media in the moment. So it's like a completely different dynamic to even when I was growing up, which wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, so, I think it's a combination of social media, COVID, performativity, enforced performativity, and my generation are at fault there. We pointed cameras at kids and said, smile for the camera. And then we posted it everywhere. We gave away, all of the data to the tech companies because we thought Facebook was so great and Instagram and everything else. We've made huge mistakes. But at the same time, also this, if we go back to, the internalized protection mechanism that is commonly known as the Gen Z stare, it's to protect them from performativity. And also the difficulty that they're having in the workforce at the moment is around not knowing how to be in the place of work, not knowing how to answer a telephone in case you don't know the answer of the question the person's asking you. It makes perfect sense. But we have a very different generation now that have grown up in a way that none of us have. And I think that there are some big challenges for us, and whose responsibility that is to sort out. Sometimes people look to educators, but, to be honest, I think this generation have inherited so much eco-anxiety, and validly so. They were sold a pup to be told that if in my day, you worked hard and you got a job, and then that job led to a house and a family and you'd be happy. Not anymore. So they've been sold untruths, no fault of our own. We thought they were going to be true, but they're not. And they're dealing with everything, absolutely everything. No wonder they're checking out. And no wonder they don't want to work in the same way as us with all of our burnout and our alcoholism and everything else. No wonder they're doing things differently. That's their response to this cultural change. And they're also moving away from technology in some really interesting ways as well to reclaim that personal space. So I have huge hope that Gen Z and Gen Alpha will help us all.
Very interesting. Let's just talk about maybe older generations for a second. How do we make sure that access to generative AI, if it becomes embedded, say you have smart cities, or say everything is smart or maybe Gen AI based, how can we ensure that older people actually have equitable access to that as well?
It goes back to that literacy piece, and it's really, really important because the category that are being the most scammed at the moment from deepfakes are that generation. They believe what they see, they believe what they hear. So we have to protect them. And one way of protecting them is to show them how all of this works, what algorithms are, and to engender a healthy mistrust of everything. I think a lot of the older generation, I know for sure, they feel very lost at the moment, and I don't blame them. So it's our responsibility, all of us as citizens, to get everybody up to speed.
Yeah, fascinating. I think I read before, or I might have heard you say it, that you travel a lot. So what's your favorite country you've ever been to and why? Or maybe name 3.
I spent a year in Tokyo when I was younger. That was amazing. It was like landing on a different planet, not a different country. I loved it. Tokyo is incredible. So that would be one. There's a little island called Gili T off the coast of Indonesia. That is a bit of a party island, but I've been there 3 times, and I have a lovely time every time I go there. It's just a tiny island in the middle of a giant sea, and some incredible people there. And then the other place would have to be on the west of Ireland. I'm mad for the west.
Like
I would
Achill
say,
or somewhere like that, like Mayo.
I would
or maybe
say
Donegal.
Donegal, I don't know so much. I do need to spend more time up there. County Clare has my heart. It does. So if I get a half day on a Friday, I'll try and get west and just a whole different kind of exhale, the wild Atlantic way. One of the best things we ever did.
And what was so appealing about Tokyo? Was it the food? Was it just kind of the infrastructure, maybe the technology? Did it feel futuristic?
Everything.
Why did you like it so much?
It was literally, Blade Runner would be my favorite film of all time, probably not surprisingly. Not the director's cut, the first one. So Blade Runner, like based on Shinjuku, so that's why I went. I literally heard an interview saying that, there was a place that this was based on, and I went there and I wasn't disappointed. I think it's also the age. I was young, I was 19, and it was very cool, and at that time, not so many blonde women walking around, more so now, I think. So there was the anomaly of that, but also not being able to understand anything in terms of the written word, the kanji, or what was spoken, it was just so exciting. It was literally like leaving Earth. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I haven't got to Japan yet, but it's certainly on the bucket list. Do you think reading has declined, even with maybe people of older generations? Do you think they read less? Do you think people just scroll on their phone more now? And do you think that's having unintended consequences? And do you think we should try maybe a futile effort to bring back reading more? Because I definitely think that teenagers, their literacy is just poorer in general. And it has to be because of social media.
I think it's to do with our attention spans, to be honest. So yes, I think it has declined. I think it'll come back. I think we always have a sort of a kickback. We thought that the Kindle would be the end of the book, but it wasn't. We thought that, technology would be the end of vinyl. It wasn't. We had this sort of romantic hankering on for the past, that we revisit these things. I think reading is essential, but I think that part of reading is about daydreaming, and we've lost the ability to be bored, right? So because we pick up our phones in every moment. So I think we need to go back to being bored, because that's really good for our creative souls. It's how we innovate and think of things and join the dots and let things process. And we're not doing that so much. So I think we're burnt out because we're obsessed with our phones, and we shouldn't be. And I think one of the best things you could do before bed is read a book and send yourself off into nice dreams. So yeah, I think that should be, we've just got into really bad habits, and I think we need to check ourselves a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. People actually underestimate the benefit of boredom or daydreaming. But I think if you're constantly engaged with something, even if it's low quality engagement, you're losing your capacity, like you said, to join the dots or make connections between different things and have creative ideas. I definitely find that. That's a very good point. If you had to recommend one non-fiction book and one fiction book, what would you go with?
Oof, now you're putting me on the spot.
It can be anything.
I'm reading a book at the moment about machines, but for the life of me now, I can't remember the name of it. It's about robots. I read a lot of ethics books. I'm seeing what's around here now. What have I got here? I read a lot of this kind of stuff. The E Factor, entrepreneurial thinking, that sort of stuff.
Okay.
I'm a big nerd for innovation and stuff, and I would read a lot around the idea of sort of the new gods, the religions at the moment. So, but I mainly listen to audiobooks. So I'll tell you what's on my audiobook list. I listen while I walk, which is much better for me. Let me get into my Audible now and see. The book I'm reading at the moment is AI Snake Oil.
Oh yeah, I read that actually. Yeah.
I'm reading that at the moment. Yeah, it's very good. It's very good.
It makes you think. It's kind of the other side of it. It's more skeptical side of.
Yeah, and I like to be. I'm quite rounded. I would read on all sides, because I think that's how you inform your own debate, right? Your internal dialogue.
Yeah, I actually looked at transcripts of the presidential elections. Presidential election debates, and there wasn't one mention of AI. Why do you think that at a political level, or maybe at a national level, it's just not in the public consciousness? Is it because we don't develop AI models? Is it because maybe Europe isn't as tech centric as the US? Like, why do you think that it didn't feature? I don't even think it was mentioned once.
I don't think we're speaking about it in the right way, that people realize actually what it could be. I think it's like people think it's like a digital tool or something. I don't think that it's being spoken of in a way that I understand it, of what I understand it to be. And so as a consequence, I don't think it's of high priority. But when you look at what we can do with it, and what we probably shouldn't do with it, these conversations get much wider. So I think it's a fear. I think people don't really understand it, and it's not being spoken about in a way that people can say, oh, I can see now what you mean. But again, just my view is my view. It's not everybody's view.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, I think it's absolutely incredible in terms of where it may lead us. But I also think we're on the cusp of making some decisions that may mean that it doesn't work out well for us in the end. So it's all to play for.
Okay, interesting. How do you recognize talent, and how would you define it?
Talent, the ability to do things differently.
Okay, so it's creativity.
Yeah. People that do things differently have an innate talent. There's many talents in terms of sort of, storytelling and singing and musicians and all the rest of it. But I think it's doing things differently. And I think it's pulling from your authentic soul, pulling something out from yourself that comes through your experiences. That is what I think talent is. Okay,
interesting. So you wouldn't just say it's like raw cognitive ability. There's something else there.
No, because what they say, to be an expert, you have to do something for 100,000 hours. Still might be not great at it.
Okay.
You might be technically good, but you might not have the soul of it, So I don't think it's just about the function.
So in terms of like skills, maybe for future generations, while we're waiting for all-powerful AI, what skills should we prioritize, given that obviously some skills will be automated more and more? Should it be leaning towards creative skills or maybe social skills? What would you see there?
Critical thinking is number one. The ability to think and debate. The ability to have debate with people that don't agree with you is essential. We're going to be more and more in our own echo chambers, and that's going to be amplified back to us. And so we're going to be surrounding ourselves by people that think like us, look like us, and feel like us, which is very dangerous. That's where we get fascism. I need to be very careful. Yeah. That's my number one skill for the future.
Just on that, do you think that right-wing maybe ideas, or even, I just mean centre-right, not necessarily Trumpian right, are ostracized in Ireland? Because the public discourse seems to be very orientated around left-wing thinking. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but it might be a bad thing that it's never challenged. And I think that might be because people associate any kind of conservative ideas with Trump, which obviously he's in his own category. I wouldn't necessarily call him a traditional like right conservative or whatever. But do you think we're a little bit monolithic around political and social discourse?
I'm going to be very diplomatic here and say that I think we need to debate more. And I think that the most important role in any organization, including the government, is the devil's advocate, the person that disagrees with you. But I'm also going to call time because it's 1:00 and I have to jump into a class.
Perfect. That's okay.
So diplomatically, I'm going to moonwalk back out again.
Perfect. Thank you.